The Syntax of Things by Arisha. Chapter 51, parentheses, Anticlassis. Hey, Potter said. It'll be a busy week. This is from Dumbledore. He'll visit soon, I suspect. Severus handed him over the letter and disappeared to the kitchen. After a moment, Potter followed. What does he mean? Severus arched an eyebrow before he withdrew his eyes and occupied himself while searching for a cup. Too late, he realized that he didn't want tea. I don't read your mail, so I don't know what you're referring to. He says that I won't be going back to Hogwarts. What does he mean? Because I'm not staying in here for a whole year, I'm not. What does he mean? Severus brewed his tea silently. What did Dumbledore mean? Most likely nothing as noble as the current kidnapping. Most likely something Severus had no wish to know or participate in, but would have to do so anyway. The Dark Lord had little patience left. He wanted the old man dead. Dumbledore toyed with the idea of facing the threat by meeting the Dark Lord all by himself, which would out Severus, of course. It was startling how it had never occurred to the slimy bastard called Albus Dumbledore to come up with a plan that would offer a chance for Severus to get out of this alive. Karma was a whore. Severus. A wet whore. Severus, he mimicked. An entirely unhinged monster jumped and protested at his stomach, ready to rip his skin with its teeth and slowly crawl out. What could he say? When exactly did it become Severus to you, pray tell? Who gave you permission to call me that? It's Professor Snape to you. What does he mean? I don't know. He was aware of the boy breathing hard in an attempt to keep his rage down. Screw you. And it somehow had to be Severus's fault again. Had he not sworn to never start a fight in this hell pit again, or any conversation with the boy for that matter, he would be furious. But as things were, he simply avoided Potter's burning gaze determinedly, finished preparing a cup of tea he was not going to drink, and patiently waited for Potter to move from the kitchen's doorstep so he could pass and leave. His work here was done. I'm not a child, you tell him that. And I'm not his slave either. I'm going to fight that war, either he agrees or not. It's my war to fight, not his. Everyone's known that since I was a baby. I've only followed his plan so far because I chose to. If I change my mind, he can't stop me. And I'm probably already changing my mind. Write him a letter and let him know. What Dumbledore had decided Dumbledore would do. Potter's protests would only make the coercion more obvious. Do you agree with him? Do you think it's fine for me to be locked up in here at all? Because of him and because of you, I behave like a coward. That's not me. I don't want to hide. Unfortunately for Potter, Horcruxes didn't stroll around London, and Horcruxes didn't fight in battles or wars either. The pawn that Potter had the luck to have become at age 1 would remain safely secured until the moment of destruction. I shall inform him. Why did he bother with tea? Why ignore the luxury that whiskey offered? He made a mental note to express his love for his most precious bottle as soon as he returned home. I know you're both hiding things from me, Potter said, struggling with his own voice. There's no reason to. Despite himself, Severus laughed. It occurred to him that the hoarse laughter that escaped his throat was far too anticlimactic for Harry's drama, and it only added to the tragic despair he would have to fight against along with his inevitable loneliness once Severus was gone for the day. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered. They were all screwed, and for more than one reason. And now he was doing it again, calling him Harry inside his head. A distant part of his consciousness protested that this turn of events was so pathetically twisted that it had to be Dumbledore's plan. Who else but Dumbledore would have thought of something so shockingly wrong and yet allow it to happen? Stay away from the boy. Yes, stay away from the boy, but please do check on him twice a day, every day, but stay away. The truth is, Severus said, that we're all doomed. You know, if you wanted to pretend it never happened, you should at least behave like you always do, not run and hide. Like I always do. You know, Potter repeated. Stick around for more than 2 minutes a day and such. Severus tossed him the book he'd left on the wooden chair he'd brought earlier this week and seated himself. He was suddenly questioning all the possible reasons this shithole had no chairs at all in the first place and found himself fuming in suspiciousness. Conspiracy theories were hardly helping. We've finished your training, which was the only reason I was staying longer. You mean we dropped it? I mean, you should drop it. I'm drinking my tea with you now, he drawled warningly. Push me and this might change. Harry sighed and made a face at his own cup of tea.
Why tea in summer?
He asked after a pause. Yes, why not something stronger? Severus silently agreed.
Why not lemon juice or something? You should bring lemon juice. And biscuits. I miss biscuits.
Dogs miss biscuits. Human beings don't.
I hate dogs.
Potter reminded him and smiled testily. Severus couldn't help but smile too. Soon he broke into low laughter. He covered his eyes with a hand and rubbed the bridge of his nose. God, he murmured. Harry bit his lip in remorse, then laughed again.
Sorry,
he said, not looking sorry at all.
I know.
You don't, Severus protested. You're going to be the end of me. You're going to be the end of me.
That chair is going to be the end of you. What is it for, mummies? You'll look like a wooden sculpture sitting there, or like Dracula in his coffin.
Severus looked at him between parted fingers. You will be pleased to know that this chair is an antique.
This is the most regular chair I've ever seen.
You have no sense of elegance. Stop talking. The tension drifted away so slowly that Severus couldn't exactly tell when it was completely gone. All he knew was that he was grateful it did. Almost. Severus walked out to the fireplace to find Potter standing next to the bed sheets covering him from head to toe.
Hello, Professor.
What on earth are you doing now?
Becoming a ghost. You think it suits me?
Raising his hands, Potter approached him slowly as he made a mooing sound that was solely capable of causing pity rather than laughter. Severus scoffed. Very mature of you. Years of teaching have certainly not been wasted. Potter stopped, and pulling them off his head, he dropped the sheets aside.
I was just changing the sheets. You're no fun at all.
I'm not, Severus agreed rather proudly. And what happened to my chair? He looked at his recently bought antique in terror as he could barely recognize it anymore. He was positively sure that the last time he'd seen it, it was respectfully dark brown. All of it. He was also sure that he had not requested it painted the colors of the rainbow.
It was boring. I fixed it.
You destroyed a rare piece of the 19th century, Severus complained as he charmed it back to normal. Potter stumbled over the wrinkled sheets on the floor and kicked them aside. The freshly washed ones Severus had brought him a few days ago laid on the bed unfolded, one worn pillow bent in two and half stuffed into a pillowcase. This might strike you as new, but you can use magic, Severus offered.
I'm imprisoned in here with nothing to do all day. I don't want to use magic.
The boy collected the dirty sheets into a pile and tossed them into the fireplace, erecting a cloud of ash.
Your detergent sucks. Use a different one next time.
Severus stared. It was never too late to reestablish his authority. He could still do it if he wanted. And if he wanted, he could also still completely tear it apart. Severus couldn't tell when he found himself tiptoeing on that double-edged sword, and for the life of his, he couldn't figure why he wasn't quitting. But if I quit, I'll fall.
Did you bring lemon juice?
He was being toyed with. At some point, carried away as he was by this travesty, he had allowed himself to become a puppet. A puppet of sentiments, most definitely. Sentiments that felt suspiciously like intimacy. Sentiments that were now eating away the best of him. On second thought, yes. He tossed him the bottle, and Potter drank from it shamelessly. Any chance of using a glass, perhaps? Potter licked his lips and shook his head.
Nah.
He couldn't fall because his falling wouldn't be as soft as a snowflake's or safe as a bird's. He would crash to the ground with all the hatred and the damnation he deserved. He would lie there on his broken, bloodied back, and he'd look up and would get lost up there watching the faces of the dead staring back down at him with unyielding animosity, pointing their fingers and mouthing profanities. I've already fallen upwards into the abyss above me. Forgive me, Lily. He felt sorry for himself. His decent self suggested that common sense was something one could not run away from. It'd catch up with him sooner or later, and he'd face the consequences of his faux pas. His blatant self merely yanked the bottle from the boy's hand and headed to the kitchen. He was aware of the parasitic creature following behind him, and just in time, Severus convinced himself not to close the door in its face.
Give it back,
Potter complained. Fear was a mind killer.
He was most certainly not afraid of the boy, except when he was near him.
Self-control. He used to have that. He took a glass from the cupboard and poured himself some juice. He drank. His palate was dry today. The sponge that his tongue had become was stuck on it with menace. He filled a second glass and handed it to Potter.
Thanks. You okay?
Severus nodded. Fear was the little death that brought total obliteration. He would face this fear, for he had faced worse. He was facing worse. When not in here, he was terrified of the Dark Lord. A long time ago, he'd been terrified of Albus Dumbledore, too. He would permit this fear, the fear of the boy, the fear for the boy, to pass over him and through him. And when it'd be over, he would breathe again. Where the fear used to be, there would be nothing. But Harry Potter in a coffin. Dead from the Dark Lord's hand. Murdered like his parents. Murdered like he was meant to be 17 years ago. And Severus would remain. Screw this. He was losing his mind.
I've been sweating all night. Potter informed him with a look that suggested that this was some very interesting piece of information. It's officially summer.
Fascinating. My whole person is moved. Potter was sweating all night, and I'm bringing him lemon juice because he asked me to.
Professor.
The worry was hard to hide as the green eyes burned him. Severus blinked. You should be thankful they didn't have enough time left to make this even more complicated. A ticking bomb echoed in his ears like a lullaby that presaged Harry's death. The too young that pierced his stomach was almost unbearable. He was going to throw up. Potter blushed and then his face went blank. If it's because of what happened, I'm sorry. I won't provoke you again. Provoke? You are not capable of provoking. Severus punched the cupboard with all his might and bared his teeth. He shot Potter a stern look that hopefully killed all reveries. The flash of anger into those eyes was the last thing he was willing to deal with. Severus would give anything to be able to slap him, even if just once. Hard! When did the little bugger become so bloody honest? Provoke, Severus sneered. Let me assure you, should I ever feel provoked, it'll be by someone a little more interesting. Potter tilted his head. I'm afraid that this line won't work until you truly obliviate me, Severus. Receiving this kind of abuse wasn't optional. Severus had earned it. He was supposed to say something after this, but his self-esteem had been greatly reduced over the last few days, and he was left with absolutely nothing to say. He was now wondering if molestation was working the other way around. He decided against pushing back. His decency shuddered in defeat, and mocked him in the form of leaving him defenseless, staring at Harry like a fool. His unwilling surrender made him dizzy. Harry hugged him, and all Severus could do was rest his chin on the boy's head.